Good evening, weary traveler of the internet. You've made it to that soft hour when the room feels too loud even in silence, and your thoughts keep pacing like they're on a tiny treadmill. Tonight you drift far north, past the last confident tree line, into Hyperborea, where pale auroras shimmer above fir tents and the cold edits every sentence down to the essentials. It's stunning, yes, but fair warning, you probably won't survive this place on optimism alone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been. Your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now, turn off the lights, take a deep, slow breath, let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. You step into Hyperborea as if you've stepped inside a snow globe, only nobody shakes it for entertainment. Snow falls in thin, dry threads that look weightless until they touch you, on your lashes, on your collar, on the warm edge of your breath. The ground under your boots is a hard crust that squeaks once, then goes quiet again. The air is clean to the point of rudeness. It strips away perfume and excuses. Your lungs take it in and your chest tightens, not from panic, but from the surprise of cold that feels precise, cold with standards. Your fingertips start to sting, as if they're reminding you that comfort is not a right up here. Ahead, the camp sits low against the wind. Fir tents crouch in a loose ring, arranged for survival rather than beauty. Their hides are layered and stitched tight, seams sealed dark with resin. The entrances face away from the worst gusts, and the ropes are anchored deep into snow that has been packed until it's as serious as stone. In the center, a fire has been banked rather than unleashed. Coals glow under ash like a calm heartbeat. A pot hangs above it, giving off a steady breath of steam that turns briefly silver when the aurora brightens overhead. That steam is the first thing that makes you feel truly human again, warmth you can see. Above everything, the aurora spreads out, pale and enormous. It doesn't sparkle like a party trick, it moves like a thought you almost remember. Green drifting into milk white, thinning into a blush so faint you wonder if your tired eyes are inventing it. The light sweeps across the tents and turns their fur into soft halos, outlining the camp as if the sky is carefully tracing what matters. You pause at the edge of the ring, letting your breathing settle. Here, even a short walk feels like negotiation. The cold reaches for the damp places first, your lips, the corner of your eyes, the warm air trapped in your sleeves. You understand instantly why people here do nothing fast unless they must. Speed wastes heat. Heat is life. A figure moves near the fire. The motion is unhurried, almost gentle, as though haste would offend the night. Layered furs soften their shape until they look like part of the camp itself. You notice practical details without meaning to. A pale cord of sinew, a bone toggle polished smooth by use, a pouch that smells faintly of pine resin and smoke. The figure approaches and angles their hand toward a nearby tent opening. It is a gesture that says, "Warmth is this way. Do not make it complicated." You follow because your body is wiser than your pride. The entrance is low. You duck and bow in the same motion, and that small lowering of your head feels like a quiet agreement with the place. Inside, the world changes, not into luxury, into permission. The air is warmer, held close by fir walls that keep heat like a secret. A shallow lamp burns with fat and wick, its flame steady and small, throwing honey-colored light across bundles stacked neatly along the edge. Everything has its place. Nothing is extra. The scent is plain and comforting. Grain, smoke, something earthy that suggests food made slowly and with care. You sit where the firs are thickest and your knees finally unclench. Your boots release faint steam. Your fingers ache as blood returns. Then the ache softens into relief. You realize how tense you've been, how you've been carrying your day like a heavy bag you forgot you could set down. Outside, the wind brushes the tent skin in long strokes like distant surf. The Aurora's glow filters through seams and tiny gaps, painting the interior with a faint green wash that comes and goes, as if the sky is breathing alongside you. Your thoughts try to chatter, messages, deadlines, the replay of small embarrassments, but the tent absorbs the sound before it can turn into a spiral. You stare at the lamp flame and let your eyes soften. The flame trembles when the wind leans in, then steadies again, stubborn and calm. Your shoulders drop. Your jaw unclenches. Tonight, you are not proving anything. You are simply present, warm-bodied beneath ancient light, learning that survival can be gentle and that rest can be part of the work. Warmth settles into your muscles in slow layers, like the tent is teaching your body a new calendar. Your fingers stop burning and begin to feel like yours again. The lamp flame keeps its small, disciplined dance, and the Aurora's faint green pulse drifts through the seams, as if the sky is checking on you every few breaths. You don't get a grand welcome. Hyperborea doesn't do grand. It does careful. Another figure slips inside, bringing a thin ribbon of cold air with them, then sealing it away with a practiced twist of the flap. They pause, just long enough for their eyes to adjust, long enough for you to notice the etiquette of the moment. Nobody rushes. Nobody makes a scene. The tent is a pocket of shared heat, and you are a guest in its economy. The first ritual is pure practicality. Snow stays outside. A fur brush is pressed into your hands, and you work it along your sleeves and shoulders until the crystals fall away like spilled salt. You pat the seams of your coat where snow hides, because up here, moisture is a traitor that waits for you to sleep. Your boots come off and are set with their openings angled toward the warmer side, not close enough to steam, not far enough to freeze. Gloves and scarf are hung on antler tines, so air can reach everything. Then comes the hand cleaning, and it's both strange and gentle. A small bowl of clean snow is set near you. You scoop a handful and rub it over your palms and fingers, the cold biting for a moment, then easing as the snow melts into a thin wash. It lifts travel grit without wasting liquid water, which is precious when everything outside is locked in ice. You wipe your hands on soft hide, then hold them near the lamp until warmth returns without shock. Around you, everyone follows the same quiet choreography. Hands warm with palms slightly up as if receiving heat instead of grabbing at it. Movements stay compact, deliberate, conserving energy the way the tent conserves air. You copy them, because your body understands before your pride does. In the center sits a shallow dish of embers, banked under ash with a calm heartbeat. No one pokes it for entertainment. When someone needs heat, they feed it a sliver of dried wood, then cover it again, conserving the glow like it's a sleeping animal. You keep your distance, copying the respectful arc people use when passing. Fire here is not a mood, it's an asset. You're shown where to sit, and the placement carries meaning without being dramatic about it. You settle along the side, close enough to be included, far enough not to disrupt the tense flow. The elders sit where the warmth is most even. Children drift between edges and center like tide, and you begin to understand that the camp is always balancing bodies the way it balances fuel, nothing wasted, nothing forced. A covered pot is lifted, and the tent fills with the steady scent of grain. Porridge, pale and humble, is ladled into a carved bowl. A spoon is set beside it, bone smoothed by years of use. The bowl comes to you with 2 hands, and you receive it the same way, because one-handed taking would look careless, like snatching. Your palms cradle the heat through the wood. You bring it close, not to gulp, but to breathe it in. Steam curls across your face and beads on your eyelashes, turning cold into something almost gentle. The first mouthful is bland in the way clean water is bland. Then the flavor deepens, smoke, fat, and a faint resin edge that tastes like the forest's memory. Your stomach answers with a simple gratitude you feel under your ribs. You chew slowly. If you rush, you burn your tongue and waste warmth, and that is the kind of mistake this place corrects immediately. You learn the shared etiquette around food by watching. Nobody eats until the bowl has been warmed in their hands for a few breaths, as if greeting the meal first. Nobody scrapes loudly. When someone finishes, they wipe the rim clean with hide and set it back in the same place, ready for the next person. Cleanliness isn't about looking polite, it's about not inviting sickness into a world where healing is slow. Other rules reveal themselves in small adjustments of space. You don't step over the rope lines that cross the floor, because those lines hold more than tent skin. They hold the geometry of safety. You don't point at the Aurora through the seam when it brightens, because pointing is a kind of claiming, and nothing up here belongs to you. You keep blades sheathed indoors, and you move your feet softly. None of it feels harsh. It feels like being cared for by people who have already made every mistake you're about to make, and who would rather you not repeat them just to earn the lesson. When your bowl is empty, your hands linger around it anyway, holding the last warmth as if it's a small animal that might bolt. The lamp flame steadies, the tent skin sighs with the wind. Above, the Aurora shifts again, pale, patient, unconcerned with your timeline. And somewhere inside you, beneath the day's noise and the life you left running like a background app, a quieter understanding opens. Welcome here is not a speech, it's shared heat, shared rules, and the gentle expectation that you will take care. Your empty bowl leaves your hands, but the warmth it gave you stays, as if your palms have memorized it. Someone wipes the rim, scrapes the last grains back into the pot, and places the bowl where it belongs. The tent runs on that kind of quiet order, because disorder costs heat. The cooking space is simple: a lidded pot, a ladle, and embers banked under ash. No clatter, no showing off. The porridge survives on patience. The pot sits close enough to sip warmth, never close enough to boil hard. A hard boil would waste steam, and steam is just warmth escaping with a smug grin. The grains swell slowly. A pinch of dried berries is crushed and sprinkled in, and the air shifts from plain to comforting. A small lump of rendered fat melts at the edge, leaving a gentle sheen. It isn't indulgence, it's insurance for bodies that must keep working tomorrow. Every tool is shaped for tired hands. Ladle handles curve under the thumb, polished by years. Bowl rims are smoothed so lips don't crack against rough wood. Spoons are bone, light, rounded, easy on mouths made tender by cold. You turn one over and see faint shaping marks, the honest signature of use. Then a bundle opens, and the tent fills with pine resin, sharp, clean, and oddly cheerful, like the forest's memory refusing to fade. A lump is warmed near the embers until it darkens and turns glossy. Someone presses it into a seam where hide stitching has loosened, and the gap disappears. Wind is an opportunist. Resin is the quiet answer. You are guided to try. The resin clings to your fingertips immediately, sticky and stubborn. Your first instinct is to wipe your hands, but you learn a better trick. A trace of fat on your fingers, just enough to make resin release without refusing to stick where it should. You press the softened resin along the seam, then smooth it with a flat bone scraper. It shines briefly, then dulls as it cools, sealing itself like a promise that doesn't need applause. Mending happens everywhere, because the cold edits fabric the way it edits breath. You spot a small snag near your elbow, probably from brushing a rope line when you were still learning where not to step. Not dramatic, but up here, small problems love to apply for promotions. A hide pouch opens to reveal needles made from bone and antler, sharpened into slim points with tiny eyes carved near the top. Beside them lies sinew thread, stored in a pale coil with the spring of something that used to be muscle. A strand is moistened, twisted thinner, and made ready. The work is slow, and the slowness is the point. Haste breaks what cannot be replaced quickly. A needle is placed in your hand. It's lighter than you expect, and sharp enough to command respect. You thread it with sinew, your fingers clumsy at first, then steadier as warmth returns to your joints. You stitch the snag closed with small, tight passes, pulling just enough to close the gap without puckering the cloth. The sinew bites and holds. You tuck the end beneath the weave and press the seam between your palms for a few breaths, encouraging it to settle. The satisfaction lands quietly in your chest. Your sleeve is whole again. Nobody celebrates. The camp simply continues. You realize that is the compliment. Being trusted to do the work is the welcome. Nearby, someone trims the lamp wick so soot stays low. In a sealed tent, soot is a polite kind of harm. The flame narrows, steadies, clean and modest. A warmed stone wrapped in hide is tucked beside sleeping furs so heat can be borrowed later without waking the fire. They keep everything dry with the same steady discipline. Fabric hung open, liners propped, mittens turned inside out. Even breath is aimed away from seams so moisture doesn't freeze into brittle crust. Comfort here isn't softness, it's control. Pine resin returns again and again, patching hides, sealing wood joints, stiffening cord ends so they lace cleanly through holes. Mixed with ash, it turns darker and tougher. Warmed and smoothed, it becomes quiet armor against wind. You watch these small variations like you're learning chemistry that fits in a palm instead of a textbook. Above, the Aurora keeps sliding across the tent skin, green into milk white, then a whisper of rose. The light turns tools into gentle silhouettes and slows your thoughts the way deep snow slows footsteps. Your hands, which arrived stiff and unsure, now hold a needle without trembling. You hold a bowl without rushing. You press resin into a seam and trust it to set. The comfort isn't luxury, it's competence. It's the soft, steady peace of learning how people make life with humble tools, then share that knowledge with you until your body believes you belong in the warmth, at least for tonight. The seam you just closed sits quietly against your elbow, and you keep brushing it with your thumb the way you check a pocket for keys. Old habits die loudly. New habits arrive like snow, soft, persistent, and suddenly everywhere. The tent's air stays warm and close, held by fur and careful decisions, and the lamp throws honey light across tools laid out with modest pride. Bone needles, antler owls, sinew coiled like pale rope, hide scraps folded as if they're future plans. You drift toward the edge where needlework gathers, drawn by the steady hush of hands that know what they're doing. It isn't the hush of boredom, it's the hush of attention, stitch after stitch, breath after breath, a rhythm that makes your mind stop sprinting for no reason. You sit where the furs are thick and watch without trying to optimize anything, because Hyperborea is not impressed by your productivity fantasies. A fur tent, you realize, is not a single shelter. It's a layered argument against wind. The outer hide takes abrasion. The inner lining catches moisture and keeps it from raining back onto sleeping bodies. Seams are placed where strain is lowest, and every rope point is reinforced. Extra patches, extra stitches, extra thought, so the tent can flex without tearing. A strip of hide is prepared for lacing. It's cut narrow, stretched, then smoothed with a flat bone tool until it lies obedient in the hand. The bone has been polished by years of repetition, and the motion is patient enough to feel ceremonial. So much of this world is made from what once belonged to an animal. Bone, sinew, hide, transformed into safety with almost no waste. Someone twists sinew between their fingers, adding a touch of melted snow, then rolling it until it becomes an even cord. It looks delicate, but it dries and tightens, clamping a seam like a gentle fist. Up here, it's less thread and more structure, survival braided into something you can hold. An owl is pressed into your palm. Its point is antler sharp, its handle wrapped for grip. You hold it too tightly at first, as if force equals competence. The point slips and your stomach gives that small, familiar drop, the one that says, you are, once again, a beginner. The tent does not react, it just waits for you to try again more carefully. This time, you let the tool work. You press, then rotate slightly, widening the opening without ripping fibers. The hide yields with a soft sigh. You make another hole at the same spacing, then another. Press, twist, release. Press, twist, release. The rhythm steadies your breathing. Your thoughts, which usually insist on commentary, soften into background static. A tent flap is being strengthened, one of those high-touch places that gets grabbed with cold hands 100 times a day. A strip of fur is positioned along the edge, meant to be both soft and stubborn. You help hold it in place while sinew threads through the holes you've made. The seam draws together like a quiet closing of palms. No flourish, just strength accumulating, stitch by stitch, until the edge looks like it was always meant to be that way. You start seeing how the craft carries memory. Notches on a handle mean a tool fits a certain hand best. A worn curve tells you where a thumb has rested for years. Hide scraps are not trash, they're future patches, bindings, ties. Even the smallest offcut is folded and stored, because waste is a luxury the cold would punish without even raising its voice. Outside, the Aurora brightens, and a faint green wash slides through the seams, turning sinew into a brief silvery gleam. The light is so soft it feels designed for this kind of work, for hands that don't need spotlight, for labor that doesn't need applause. You find yourself matching the pace around you, as if your nervous system is taking notes. You make a mistake anyway because you are still human and the night is long. You pull one stitch too tight and the hide puckers into a ridge that will catch frost and wear faster. The flaw is obvious once you see it, like a crooked picture frame you can't unsee. You ease the sinew back through the hole, slow and patient, resisting the urge to pretend it's fine. You redo the stitch with a gentler pull, keeping the seam flat. The fix is not flawless, but it is sound, and something in you relaxes at the simple idea that repair is allowed. Time inside the tent turns syrupy. The lamp burns steady. The embers hold their quiet pulse. Now and then, the familiar breath of porridge steam drifts across the space, and the scent of pine resin lingers where earlier seams were sealed. The tent skin murmurs with wind, but it no longer sounds threatening. It sounds like weather talking outside the door of a safe room. When you finally lean back, your fingertips are sore in a satisfying way, the ache of work that actually did something. The seam you helped stitch lies flat and strong. The flap will close better, seal tighter, last longer. In this soft lamplight, shelter stops being something you purchase and starts being something you build, a calm craft, an everyday art, a quiet promise repeated until the cold has fewer and fewer places to enter. Your fingertips still hum from stitching, the kind of tired that feels earned rather than extracted. When you finally rise, the tent seems a little larger, maybe because you've stopped bracing for it to reject you. Outside, the world waits in that vast, moonless patience that makes time feel like a slow inhale. You duck through the flap, and the cold greets you like an honest critic. It doesn't insult you, it simply tells the truth. Your breath turns instantly visible, a pale ribbon that you learn to keep small. Big breathing is for warm rooms and dramatic speeches. Out here, you keep it modest, tucked behind scarf and teeth, so moisture doesn't frost your face into a crunchy mask of regret. Near the camp's edge, a few figures stand with the stillness of people who don't waste movement. Their clothing is layered with purpose, fur against skin, tighter weave outside, seams sealed where wind likes to pry. They check straps, they adjust bindings, they make sure nothing flaps, because sound travels differently over snow, and the quiet here is not empty, it's information. You fall in behind them with the humility of a beginner, trying not to stomp like you're making a point. Your feet want to crunch, because your feet have been raised in places where noise means you're alive and doing things. Hyperborea offers a different lesson. Noise means you're sloppy, and sloppy means you get cold faster. You shorten your steps, you let your weight settle into the snow instead of punching through it. The squeak under your boots becomes softer, like the ground is finally accepting your apology. Beyond the ring of tents, the land opens into pale distance. Low hummocks, wind-combed drifts, the black teeth of rocks half buried. There are no trees to catch your eye, no buildings to promise direction. The sky feels closer, heavier, and the aurora smears across it in a thin veil that brightens and fades like a sleepy pulse. It's beautiful in the way a glacier is beautiful, indifferent, precise, and not remotely concerned with your feelings. The hunters move without talking, not because they're trying to seem mysterious, but because listening is the whole point. You start to hear what they hear once you stop auditioning your own thoughts. Wind slides over snow with different tones depending on the surface. Hard crust sings higher, powder breathes lower. Your scarf muffles most of it, so you loosen it just enough to let sound in, then immediately regret it as cold nips your cheekbones. You adjust again. Everything is calibration. They pause often, and you learn this is not hesitation. It's reading. A drift isn't just a drift, it's a record of the last winds. A shallow depression isn't just a dent, it's a place where something sheltered, or moved, or waited. A line of tiny pockmarks might be snowflakes frozen mid-scatter, or it might be a trail of something small that hopped and paused and hopped again. Your eyes work harder than they ever do in a city, because there are no signs to tell you what matters. You must decide, and then you must be correct. One of the hunters kneels, gloved fingers hovering over a faint mark in the crust. You kneel too, slower, letting your knees find a stable patch so you don't crack the surface with a loud crunch. Up close, the mark resolves into a slight oval, the edge pressed smooth where weight settled. Beside it, another, a spacing, a direction. You follow the line with your eyes until it fades into wind-scrubbed white, then reappears, then fades again. It is not obvious, and that's the trick. Hyperborea doesn't hand you answers, it hands you hints and expects you to behave like someone who wants to live. You lift your head and notice how the others orient themselves. Never straight at the wind, never fully back to it. Their bodies are always negotiating with weather, always spending the minimum to get the maximum. It's a very unromantic kind of elegance. You walk again, and your body tries to warm itself by working harder. Sweat threatens at your spine, a dangerous luxury. Sweat is warmth leaving your body in liquid form, then freezing into a stiff lesson. You slow down. You let the cold keep you honest. Your breathing steadies, smaller and calmer, and your heat stays where it belongs, inside. The hunters stop at a rise. From here, the land dips into a shallow basin where snow lies deeper and softer, protected from the worst wind. You can tell by the texture. This snow looks plush rather than polished, like it hasn't been sanded by air. In the basin, faint disturbances mark the surface, subtle, almost polite. Your eyes want to dismiss them as nothing, because your brain has been trained to ignore what isn't flashing. But you force yourself to look again. There, tiny scatters, a slight drag, a shallow imprint that suggests a body sat down, then moved on. The hunters wait, letting you see it without pointing, because pointing is loud, even when silent. You understand the habit now. They train attention the way you train muscle. You listen. At first, you hear nothing but wind. Then you hear a different nothing, an absence in the wind's texture, as if air is being interrupted somewhere far ahead. A low ridge might block it, or a moving shape might. You don't know, but your senses begin to catalog possibilities instead of insisting on certainty. That shift feels like your mind unclenching. They move downhill in a slow arc, keeping their silhouette low against the aurora-lit sky. You copy, crouching slightly, distributing weight, stepping where the snow is firm. Your boots find a crust that holds. Under it, softer powder gives with a gentle sigh. The sound is small, and you feel absurdly proud of it, like you've learned a secret handshake with winter. In the basin, the air smells different, not strong, just altered. A faint animal warmth, a hint of musk, the suggestion of life that has recently been here and will be here again. Your city brain wants a label, a quick answer, a neat caption. Hyperborea offers you only the feeling. Something breathes in this cold, and you are close enough to matter. One hunter lifts a hand, palm down, and everyone stills. You still too, freezing mid-breath. The world becomes a held note. Your ears strain. Somewhere ahead, a soft scrape, snow shifting under weight, the smallest betrayal of movement. Then silence again. You don't see the animals clearly, not yet. What you see instead is the lesson. Hunting here is not a chase, it's a conversation with wind and distance and time, and you are the slowest speaker at the table. The hunters do not force the land to give, they wait until the land offers. They are not cruel, they are precise. They take what they must, and they do it with a restraint that feels almost tender. Eventually, the moment passes, not failure, not success, simply the world continuing. The hunters turn back in the same measured arc, and you follow, feeling oddly lighter. You came out expecting drama. You found discipline. You came out expecting conquest. You found listening. As you return toward the low glow of camp, auroras spilling pale green over fur tents, you understand why the first thing they taught you wasn't how to throw a spear or set a snare. It was how to be quiet enough to notice what keeps you alive. The camp's low circle of fur tents rises out of the whiteness like a patient idea. You return with the hunters, as if you're returning from a lesson rather than a pursuit, your body warm from controlled movement, and your mind unusually quiet. The aurora above has shifted, still pale, still slow, but now threaded with a faint ribbon of pink that looks like the sky blushing at its own beauty. At the edge of camp, you pause in the practiced way you've learned, letting your breath settle before you bring cold air inside. Snow is brushed from shoulders. Your boots are checked for ice that could melt into dampness later. You feel yourself doing these small actions without resentment, which is the real sign you're adapting. Hyperborea doesn't ask you to be heroic, it asks you to be consistent. Outside one tent, sled dogs wait in a loose cluster, their bodies compact and ready, fur thick as storm clouds. They are not frantic. They conserve energy in the same way the camp does, quiet, efficient, watchful. Their eyes track you with a calm intelligence that feels a little judgmental, which is fair because you arrived here with city confidence and a heart full of assumptions. Someone checks each harness with the tenderness of routine, straps straight, knots flat, no twists that could chafe. A pause lifted, inspected, set down again. A dog leans into the touch, then settles, as if affection is welcome but not worth making a fuss about. You notice how the handlers keep their voices absent, no calling, no coaxing, because the dogs read hands and posture better than they read sounds. You're guided toward a sled, and you take in its design the way you took in the bone tools, humble, purposeful, perfected by repetition. The runners are smooth and slightly curved, meant to skim rather than dig. The frame is lashed with cord that can flex and absorb impact. There are no metal fittings here that would snap from cold brittleness. Everything is wood, hide, sinew, materials that bend instead of shatter, that forgive. Before anyone moves, the route is reviewed without maps in the modern sense. People look outward, toward distant shapes in the snow, a rock outcrop, a low ridge, a slight dip where drifts gather. These are landmarks not because they're impressive, but because they remain when everything else changes. The sky matters too, the angle of aurora glow against cloud haze, the scatter of stars when wind clears the air, the subtle brightness that suggests thin ice versus thick. You stand beside the sled and realize travel here isn't about going somewhere. It's about not dying while you move between places. When the dogs finally rise, it isn't with barking celebration, it's with readiness, spines flexing, paws settling, breath puffing small clouds. The lines tighten and the sled shifts as if it's waking up. You step onto the runner platform carefully, weight centered, knees soft. You've already learned that stiffness is a mistake that turns into bruises fast. The sled glides forward with a hush that feels unreal. Snow compresses under runners, and the sound is a smooth, low whisper, not the crunch you expected. The dogs pull in steady rhythm, their shoulders working like synchronized waves. Your balance adjusts automatically, a quiet dance with momentum. You lean slightly into turns, you ease back on straightaways. You learn to trust the sled's movement rather than fight it. The cold on your face sharpens, but the motion keeps you warm. Wind combs your eyelashes with tiny ice, and your scarf catches your breath so your lips don't split. The aurora's light spills across the snow ahead, turning the ground into a faintly glowing path, as if you're traveling over a sleeping sea of pale fire. You pass through a corridor formed by snowbanks, then out into wide openness again. The camp shrinks behind you, and for a moment you feel that old modern panic, the urge to check your phone, to confirm your coordinates, to have something in your pocket that proves you're still connected to the world. Your hand twitches toward where a device would be. It finds only fur and fabric, and the steady thump of your own pulse. And oddly, that is enough. The route bends toward a low ridge where wind has scoured the surface into hard crust. The sled speeds up slightly, runners skimming. The dog's breath grows louder, a steady rhythm of effort. You notice how the lead dog keeps its head low, eyes forward, reading the snow the way the hunters read tracks. The team trusts the lead, the handlers trust the team. Trust here is not a sentiment, it is infrastructure. You crest the ridge and the world opens again, flat, luminous, and vast. The aurora above spreads wider, its pale curtains drifting as if being pulled across the sky by invisible hands. The light softens the horizon, making distance feel dreamlike. For a moment, you don't know where land ends and sky begins, and your mind relaxes into that uncertainty instead of trying to solve it. You stop briefly near a marker, an upright pole wrapped with dark cord and resin-sealed leather strips. It is not a flag, it is a memory anchor, a sign that says the route has been traveled before, that someone cared enough to leave guidance. You touch it lightly, feeling the resin's hard surface under your glove. It is both human and humble, proof that the world can be kind without being loud about it. Then you turn back toward camp, because travel for travel's sake is a luxury, and tonight you're learning the camp's rhythm rather than inventing your own. The dogs lean into their harnesses again, and the sled glides home through Aurora light. When the tents reappear low and warm against the whiteness, you feel a strange tenderness for that ring of shelter. You dismount carefully, legs tingling with the afterglow of motion. The dogs are unhitched and guided to rest, and you watch how the camp's care extends to them. Paws checked again, fur brushed free of ice, food offered in measured portions. You entered this place thinking the north would be all harshness. Instead, you're learning that the harshness is just the environment. The people and the dogs and the quiet systems they've built, those are the softness. The glide of the sled still lingers in your knees, even after you step back onto packed snow. Inside the tents, the air is warm again, but it's a careful warmth, earned, guarded, portioned out like the porridge that keeps everyone steady. You take a few breaths of it, then follow the camp's evening drift toward the frozen lake. The lake lies beyond a shallow rise, a flat darkness under pale auroras. Snow has been swept aside in wide patches, revealing ice that looks like old glass, scuffed, clouded, strong. Neat circles have been cut through the surface. Around each hole, chips are piled like shaved crystal. A small fire sits in a shallow pit, banked rather than blazing, and a fat wick lamp glows beside it, just enough to keep hands obedient. You kneel near a hole and look down. The water beneath is darker than you expect, swallowing light and returning it as a thin, trembling ribbon. Your breath fogs the opening, so you angle your face away. You've learned that moisture is a quiet enemy that loves to freeze into tomorrow's problem. A short rod is placed in your hands, smooth wood, no frills. The line is twisted sinew, lightly waxed. The hook is bone, sharp and small, the kind of tool that does its job without demanding admiration. Hyperborea doesn't reward shiny equipment. It rewards steady hands. You loop the line once around your fingers, just enough for control without trapping yourself if something pulls hard. Then you lower the hook into the hole slowly, watching it slip through the surface with barely a sound. And then you wait. Waiting here is not a gap between events. It is the event. You sit low, compact, letting your shoulders drop. Behind you, the camp shifts in tiny noises, boots settling, snow brushed aside, rope creaking once. Your thoughts try to fill the quiet with lists and unfinished arguments, but the ice doesn't care, and that indifference is oddly generous. Above, the aurora brightens, green fire moving across the sky in slow folds. Your eyelids grow heavier, not from boredom, but from the steady permission to be still. Your line twitches. It's subtle enough to be mistaken for your pulse. You breathe shallowly and keep the line steady. Another twitch, a faint pull like something down there is curious but not committed. You lift gently. Too fast and you tear. Too slow and the lake decides you're not worth the effort. The hook rises. For a second there is resistance, a living weight that makes the sinew hum. Your heart tries to sprint ahead, but you keep your hands calm because you've watched this camp survive, not with panic, with control. The resistance vanishes. The line comes up empty, droplets freezing into tiny beads along the hook. Your first instinct is embarrassment, as if you've failed a test. Then the absurdity arrives. You were being humbled by an unseen fish under a vast aurora-lit sky. The north doesn't insult you, it simply refuses to be impressed. You lower the hook again, slower, letting it sink and settle. Wind pushes a thin veil of snow across the ice. Someone brushes it away from the holes with a flat board, keeping the work honest. A small problem forms quietly. The rim of your hole begins to glaze. Thin ice crawls into a fragile ring, and your line starts to catch against it, the grit of freezing water grabbing at sinew. You don't fight it. You warm your hands near the banked fire for a few seconds, then take a flat bone scraper and skim the new ice away. It breaks with a soft crackle, pieces sliding into the dark water like fallen stars. You wipe the tool dry, always dry, and feel a calm satisfaction at solving something without turning it into a crisis. Your line twitches again, sharper this time. You lift with careful firmness, and the resistance stays. The line draws taut. Your fingers feel the pulse of something alive. You guide it upward in steady increments, letting whatever is down there tire itself out rather than demanding a quick victory. The surface breaks, and a small silver body flashes under the Aurora's green wash before sliding onto the ice. It is not a trophy, it is simply food, shining, real, quiet. Someone nearby handles it quickly, practiced, and efficient, and your attention politely chooses not to linger on details that would make bedtime less kind. The fish is carried to the side where a shallow pan waits near embers. The scent that rises is warm and clean. It feels like the camp's philosophy in one breath: simple, careful, enough. When the pieces are shared, they are small and fair. You take yours and let it rest between your palms first, warming it the way you warmed the porridge bowl, greeting it, acknowledging the patience it took to become this bite. The taste is smoke-kissed and deeply satisfying. Warmth settles into you like a soft stone placed against the ribs. You lift your eyes again to the Aurora. It keeps moving, indifferent to your success and your failure. And yet, under its pale green fire, you feel included, one more warm creature kneeling on the ice, learning that stillness is not emptiness, and that the night can feed you if you meet it with patience. The warmth of the fish lingers in your stomach like a small, steady lantern. You return from the ice with your shoulders slightly looser, your steps more measured, as if the camp has taught your bones a new tempo. Inside the nearest tent, the air is soft and close again, smoke-filtered, fur-lined and threaded with that familiar pine resin edge that keeps seams honest. You expect, in some modern reflex, that now someone will tell a story. You imagine a circle, dramatic gestures, a voice rising and falling. But Hyperborea does not perform history. It stores it. Along the tent wall, objects sit in a neat row: carved pieces of bone, short lengths of cord, small pouches with toggles, a flat board etched with lines so faint they appear only when the lamplight catches them at an angle. These things do not look like museum treasures. They look like tools that got tired and decided to become memory instead. An elder, older by posture more than spectacle, moves with careful knees and sets a bundle in front of you. The bundle opens to reveal a strip of hide, pale and smoothed, marked with tiny cuts and pressed dents. The pattern runs along its length like a quiet code. You lean in, and the scent of smoke and old fat and time reaches you, not unpleasant, more like an attic full of family winters. Your fingers hover above the markings, and you wait because you have learned not to grab at meaning. Meaning here is offered, not extracted. The strip is turned so the lamp makes shadows in the notches. Suddenly, the pattern becomes readable, not as letters, but as rhythm. Clusters of short cuts, a longer gap, a pressed circle like a thumbprint, a line that has been darkened with resin. Your mind, desperate to translate, starts inventing explanations. You let those explanations float by without attaching to them. You simply notice. A second object is placed beside the strip, a length of cord with knots tied at irregular intervals, each knot different, some tight and small, some looser and wider, some doubled. You touch them lightly and feel how each knot carries a distinct shape, a distinct message, its tactile history, memory you can hold in the dark. You begin to understand the idea. When the weather can erase footprints overnight, you cannot rely on fragile records. When paper would crackle and rot, you do not write, you carve, you knot, you embed memory in things that survive cold and travel. The story becomes portable, durable, and shared, passed hand to hand like warmth. Another board appears, flat and dark, with shallow grooves that curve like a river seen from above. Small stones sit in some grooves. A bone peg marks a point. You watch how a hand slides the peg along a curve, then taps a stone, then moves to the next groove. It is not a game. It is a path traced again and again until it becomes instinct. Routes between camps, seasonal migrations, safe ice, dangerous thin patches, places where the wind always turns mean. You follow with your eyes, and the movement makes your brain feel quieter. It's like watching someone draw a map without ink. You realize how much of your own memory depends on devices that could die in the cold before you finish complaining about it. Here, memory is physical. It has weight. It can't be deleted by accident. A small charm is passed into your hands, bone shaped into a simple form, an animal head or a bird or something in between, stylized enough to be universal. It has tiny scratches along the back, evenly spaced. You count them without meaning to. Then you stop counting because it feels like a modern kind of greed. The charm is not a necklace for aesthetics, it is a marker. Each scratch may represent a winter survived, a storm endured, a child born, a hunting season that went well, a sickness that did not win. The object holds the kind of history that matters when your world is cold, events tied to survival, to belonging, to the continuity of people. You look around and notice similar marks everywhere, on tool handles, on bowl rims, on the ends of sled runners, small signatures, small records, not boastful, just present. You imagine that years from now, someone might hold a spoon and feel the groove where a thumb rested 1,000 times, and that groove itself would be a story. A person ate, a person warmed their hands, a person kept living. A small problem slips in, soft as a draft. Your sleeve seam, your newly mended seam, catches on a cord line near the floor. It tugs, and you freeze, immediately aware of the rule: don't disturb the lines. Your stomach tightens. The snag is tiny, but tiny is how trouble starts here. You don't yank, you breathe. You kneel slowly, following the camp's careful pace, and lift the cord line gently with 2 fingers. You ease your sleeve free without pulling the stitch. Then you check your elbow seam by touch. Still sound, no new tear. You feel absurdly grateful, not just because you avoided damage, but because you handled it the Hyperborean way, calm, deliberate, repair-minded. The elder watches without expression that you can interpret as praise, and that makes it feel more real. You are not being applauded for basic competence, you are simply being allowed to remain in the warmth. The aurora outside shifts again, casting faint green light through the seams and turning the carved notches into tiny shadow valleys. You sit with the objects a while longer, letting their quiet language sink in. It is soothing in a way spoken stories sometimes aren't, because there is no pressure to remember every word, no need to interpret perfectly. The history is in your hands, in texture and shape, and your body understands it as a kind of safety. You set the charm down carefully, exactly where it was, as if returning a borrowed heartbeat, and you realize you've been welcomed into something deeper than a camp, a way of holding the world that doesn't rely on noise, a way of remembering that fits inside a pocket, inside a palm, inside the slow, pale shimmer of an aurora-lit night. The objects return to their places along the wall, as if memory itself prefers neatness. The tense air remains warm and close, but you feel the outside pressing against it, the cold's patient insistence, the wind's restless fingers. You sleep in short stretches, waking and drifting again, your body learning that rest up here is not a long fall into darkness, but a series of careful landings. When morning comes, it doesn't arrive with sunlight, it arrives with a change in sound. The tense skin no longer murmurs softly, it thumps. Wind hits in long, heavy pushes, as if something massive is leaning its shoulder into the camp. The ropes hum with tension, vibrating low through the floor. Snow grains skitter against the hide in fast little scratches, tiny impacts that add up to a warning. You sit up, listening, and the lesson from the hunt returns immediately. Noise is information. People are already moving, calm and quick without being frantic. The lamp is trimmed lower to conserve fuel. Bedding is rolled and tucked out of the way, because an interior cluttered with loose furs becomes dangerous if the tent needs adjustment fast. Outside, figures pass like shadows, heads lowered, bodies angled to let the wind slide by instead of slamming them broadside. The whiteout begins with no drama. First, the horizon blurs. Then the sky and ground start to look like the same substance. Then distance collapses until even nearby tents seem to float in a pale void, their edges softened by blowing snow. Your eyes search for an anchor, rock, ridge, tree, and find nothing. The world becomes blank paper, and the wind takes up the pen. You step out briefly, and the cold hits with new aggression. It's not colder exactly, it's more insistent, more invasive. Snow needles your cheeks, your eyelashes crust. You narrow your eyes, and the world narrows with you, reduced to a few feet of shifting white. The aurora is gone behind cloud and churn. The sky is now a lid. This is the moment when your modern instincts, those fragile little interior alarms, begin to ring. You want to do something. You want to check forecasts, look for radar, call someone. You want a notification that says, "Storm will end in 34 minutes." Hyperborea offers you a different notification. Survive by staying close, staying low, staying calm. Someone gestures you back into shelter. You obey without argument because the wind makes arguments feel silly. Inside, the camp reorganizes itself with the same quiet competence you saw in needlework. Ropes are checked, knots are tightened, then flattened so they don't cut into hide. Seams are pressed with warm resin where a draft begins to slip in. Snow is brushed off the outside slope where it piles, because weight can turn fabric into collapse. Your role becomes obvious. Don't be extra. Don't be heroic. Be useful in small ways. You hold the lamp steady while someone adjusts a rope tension point. You hand over a bone scraper when ice starts to crust along the seam near the entrance. You brush snow that has blown in, sweeping it into a shallow pit where it won't melt into dampness. Your movements stay slow and compact. Even inside, rushing creates mistakes. The storm intensifies, and the tent skin flexes in the gusts, bowing inward like a lung. The sound is constant now. Wind, snow, rope hum. Your nervous system tries to interpret the noise as threat. You counter it by matching the camp's rhythm. Inhale slow, exhale slower. Hands busy, mind steady. There is a ritual of reassurance in the middle of it. Not spoken reassurance, physical. A warmed stone wrapped in hide is passed along the line of people. Each person holds it for a few breaths, letting heat sink into their palms, then passes it on. The stone circulates like a quiet heartbeat shared among bodies. When it reaches you, it feels almost too comforting. Solid warmth in a world that is trying to erase edges. You hold it, let your fingers thaw, then return it without clinging. Another problem forms, small and sharp. One of the ropes near the tent's outer edge begins to slip in its anchor point. You can hear it, a change in pitch, a faint squeal where cord rubs against frozen snow. If it loosens too far, the wind will pull the tent skin harder, stressing seams. The camp responds without panic. Someone retrieves an extra anchor, an antler stake, wide and strong. Another warms resin to stiffen the cord end, making it easier to thread. You're directed to brace the interior pole with your shoulder, holding it steady while tension is reset. The pole presses into your collarbone, and you feel the tense weight in a real, intimate way. This is not abstract shelter. This is a structure depending on your body for a moment. Outside, through the entrance slit, you catch glimpses of white swirling like smoke. A figure crawls low, moving along rope lines to reach the slipping anchor. The wind tries to lift them. They angle their body so it slides over, not under. The stake is driven deeper. The cord is tightened. The knot is flattened. The hum of the rope returns to a steadier tone. Your shoulder eases off the pole. You breathe out slowly, realizing you've been holding your breath like you are underwater. Hours pass in a blur of careful tasks and shared heat. The storm turns the world into an endless hallway of white. Inside, the tent remains a pocket of order, a small argument against chaos. You feel the camp's collective attention holding the structure together, hands checking, eyes scanning, bodies positioned where needed, movements economical. And in that sustained, wind-battered quiet, you learn something the modern world rarely teaches. Problems do not always require drama. Sometimes they require presence. Sometimes the solution is simply to keep the knot tight, keep the fire banked, keep your breathing slow, and trust the steady hands around you until the storm decides to loosen its grip. The storm does not end so much as it loosens. The tent skin stops bowing inward and returns to a steady tension. The rope hum drops a few notes. Snow still rasps against hide, but the sound loses that sharp edge that makes your nervous system audition for disaster. Inside, the camp shifts from emergency to upkeep with the same quiet discipline. The lamp stays small. The embers remain banked. Someone presses along resin-sealed seams, checking whether the cold has found a new gap. You are handed a bundle for outside work, a coil of cord, an extra antler stake, and the flat board used to brush drifts from rope lines. Not heroic gear, just the boring truth of survival. You duck out low, and the world meets you with a pale blur. Visibility has improved from nothing to a handful of steps. Snow dust floats in the air and clings to your eyelashes, turning each blink into a slow scrape. You find the rope line that runs tent to tent and keep one gloved hand on it. The line is your leash to reality. You angle your body so the wind slides rather than shoves, then move in short, economical steps because you have learned that rushing is just sweating in a nicer outfit. At the next anchor point, the rope dips under a shallow drift. You brush it clean with the board, sending powder skimming away. Your scarf catches your breath. Your mind tries to chatter, but the cold edits it down. A gust leans into you. You widen your stance, ride it, then go still again. You move on, counting steps without meaning to, the way you count anything when you want control. Then the rope changes. Not a snap, just sudden slack. Your hand feels unhooked. You stop immediately. You lift your head and realize the tents have become uncertain shadows, their edges softened by blown snow. You search for the center, fire glow, lamp glow, any warm point to orbit. The whiteness offers nothing but motion. Panic arrives, punctual and overconfident. You do not follow it. You inhale slow, exhale slower. Shoulders drop, knees soften. You keep contact. Your hand stays on the rope. You slide your glove along it, feeling for knots, flattened, pressed, familiar shapes that tell you where you are better than your eyes can. You find a double knot, two tight bulges close together, and you remember seeing that pattern near the storage side of camp. Probably becomes your best friend. Sure is how people wander into a story's worst version. You take 3 careful steps, and the rope leads into a low drift where it disappears. You kneel, shield the spot with your body, and brush. The rope reappears, and beneath it sits a small marker, a strip of dark leather wrapped around a short stake, resin sealed so it won't fray. A storm anchor, a quiet hint that the camp expects the world to misbehave. Relief comes, but you keep it small. Relief is useful only if it doesn't make you careless. You choose the simplest method, backtrack. You turn slowly, rope in your left hand, and step into the shallow dents your boots already made. It is not cinematic, it is effective. Halfway back, you see what pulled you off course. Wind has built a soft wall along one side of the rope corridor, narrowing your path and shifting the shadows. If you rely on sight alone, you will keep reinventing the camp until you believe your own mistake. So you rely on touch and rhythm, hand sliding, knot to knot, breath slow, steps measured. Your glove finds the broad, flattened knot you remember from earlier, the one tightened while you braced the interior pole with your shoulder. The memory is physical, and it points you home. Then a faint glow appears ahead, barely there, like a sleepy coin of light on the snow. Lamplight, filtered through hide. You move toward it without speeding up, because sprinting now would turn warmth into sweat, and sweat into a private little tragedy. The glow resolves into a seam, then an entrance slit. You duck inside, and warmth hits your face like a gentle hand. Eyelashes thaw, cheeks sting as feeling returns. The camp's scents, smoke, grain, pine resin, wrap around you like proof. You set the bundle down where it belongs. You brush snow from your shoulders. You wipe your gloves dry. You do not announce what happened, because Hyperborea does not trade in drama. It trades in corrections made early. Later, when the sky clears enough to show itself again, the Aurora returns, pale green sliding overhead as if the storm never tried to erase you. You look up from the tent entrance and feel a quiet gratitude settle in your chest. You did not conquer the whiteout. You stayed steady inside it, touched the rope, counted your steps, and found your way back by refusing to hurry. Warmth clings to you as the tent flap falls shut, sealing out the last pale shove of wind. Your cheeks sting as they thaw, and you sit for a moment just to feel the simple luxury of air that doesn't bite. The camp shifts into a mode you recognize immediately. Not panic, not celebration, accounting. The storm has taken time, and time has taken fuel. The lamp is turned down until its flame is a disciplined seed. The embers are covered again, smothered into a slow glow instead of being allowed to flare. Even footsteps inside become quieter, as if noise itself might spend heat. Your modern instincts try to make this emotional. You want to apologize for consuming anything. You want to insist you're fine, you don't need extra. Hyperborea corrects that impulse with a calmer rule. Don't waste, and don't perform suffering either. Take what is offered cleanly. Pay it back with usefulness. A flat board is set out with what remains easy to portion: dried fish, a small bag of grain, a lump of rendered fat wrapped in hide, a pinch of berries for brightness. No one labels it rationing. It's simply tomorrow being protected. Hands measure without scales, split by sight, adjusted by feel, adjusted again until fairness sits right in the air. Fat is shaved into thin curls so it melts efficiently. Grain is poured in steady pinches, because each pinch is a little decision. You're given work that fits a guest. Melt snow without soaking the tent in steam. A pot is set near the embers, not above them. You add a little liquid first so nothing scorches, then feed in snow slowly, stirring to collapse air pockets. The heat holds steady. The water rises without drama. When steam blooms, someone cracks a top flap for a breath, venting moisture fast, then seals it again before the cold can get ideas. Fatigue is managed like fuel. After a storm, bodies run on leftover alertness that feels useful right up until it makes mistakes. Tasks rotate. Hands that were outside get time near the warmest wall. People who stayed inside take a turn at the entrance, brushing back the thin drift that sneaks in, keeping the floor dry. The camp refuses to let adrenaline become leadership. A quiet problem appears. The lamp sputters, and a thin thread of soot curls upward. Not a crisis, just the kind of early warning that matters. A dirty flame eats oxygen and lays down grime. Grime becomes cough. Cough becomes weakness. Weakness becomes the kind of story nobody wants. You take the bone tool used for shaping the wick. You steady your hands and shave the edge to a clean slope. The flame steadies, narrows, brightens without growing. The soot thins. The tense air feels cleaner almost immediately, like the space has been allowed to breathe. Then the warmth math becomes physical. Bedding is adjusted so gaps close. A folded hide is placed near the entrance to block a low draft. A seam along the floor line is pressed with warmed resin until it turns glossy and tight, sealing like a quiet mouth. Warming stones are wrapped and tucked where they'll do the most good: feet, lower backs, the small joints that complain first. Food comes again, porridge enriched with careful fat curls and a crumble of berries. You take your bowl with 2 hands and hold it long enough to warm your palms. The first bite is plain, the second is better, the third tastes like stability. Across from you, someone splits their portion and slides the smaller piece back into the common pile. It isn't a show, it's an adjustment, as ordinary as tightening a knot. Maybe they ate more yesterday. Maybe their body needs less today. Maybe they saw you out in the white and decided the math should lean slightly your way. Your throat tightens with the instinct to refuse. You have been trained to prove you deserve. Hyperborea has trained everyone to survive as a group. You accept without theatrics, then give back in the only way that counts. You make sure the next job you take is done well. When the wind outside softens further, you sit near the flap for an entrance check. You brush away the thin drift that sneaks in. You wipe your gloves dry. You listen to the rope hum and let its pitch tell you whether tension is holding. Your hand slides along the cord, finding flattened knots you now recognize like landmarks. By the time bodies settle down, the storm feels less like a monster and more like weather doing what weather does. People lie in positions that share heat, furs overlapping slightly, empty spaces minimized, warmth kept circulating rather than leaking into nothing. The lamp stays small but steady. The embers stay banked but alive. You lie down too, a warmed stone against your lower back like a gentle anchor. Your mind tries to replay the blank whiteness, the slack rope, the moment you realized distance had collapsed, but the tense order presses against those thoughts until they soften. You understand what the camp has been teaching you all along. Survival is not only strength, it is accounting. It is fairness. It is the quiet grace of sharing what keeps you alive, then letting sleep arrive without demanding a speech. Sleep comes in shallow waves, and when you wake again, the air feels steadier, not warm. Hyperborea doesn't do warm the way your old world does, but steadier, as if the tent has regained its confidence. The storm's aftertaste remains. Fine grit in corners, a faint ache in shoulders from bracing, the sense that the world outside has been rearranged without asking. In the gray half-light, someone notices the damage that the whiteout tried to write into the camp. One tent, not yours, has a long tear along a seam where the wind leaned hardest. It isn't catastrophic. It's worse than catastrophic in this place because it's subtle enough to tempt delay. A draft, a widening gap, moisture slipping in, small failures that grow teeth overnight. The camp responds the way it always does: calm first, then hands. The torn skin is brought into a working tent, laid flat on thick furs so it doesn't pick up snow. The tear runs like a crooked mouth, edges frayed and stiff from cold. You see where stitching held until it didn't, where resin seal cracked under strain. The seam's failure looks almost personal, like the wind found a weak spot and kept worrying it. You are handed tasks in sequence, like steps in a recipe. First, soften the edges. Cold hide can tear further if you force it. Warmed stones are placed near, not on, the tear, to coax flexibility back into the fibers. The lamp is angled so its heat reaches the seam without scorching. people wait. This waiting is part of the work, and you feel your impatience flicker, then fade, because you've learned what impatience costs. When the hide yields under your fingers again, you brush the edges clean. Fine snow crystals have embedded along the tear, and you remove them with a soft brush, then wipe with a dry strip of cloth. Everything must be dry. Moisture is the silent saboteur that freezes into brittleness, then snaps the next time wind pulls. Next comes the patch. A piece of hide is chosen not by size alone, but by grain direction and thickness. A patch must flex with the tent skin, not fight it. Someone holds the patch up to the light, checking how it bends. It's trimmed with a blade that moves slow and sure. No sawing, no ragged cuts. Clean edges mean fewer places for drafts to find purchase. You help punch holes with the awl, evenly spaced, closer than you'd bother with if you were sewing in comfort. Here, redundancy is safety. Each hole is pressed, twisted, released. Press, twist, release, until your breath matches the rhythm. The work steadies you the way the lake did, your mind quiet, your hands busy, time thick and slow. Sinew is prepared, and you recognize the little tricks now. A touch of moisture to twist it smooth, a little warmth to keep it pliable, a careful pull to test for weak fibers. The needle, bone, polished, slides through hide with a satisfying resistance. Stitch after stitch, the patch is anchored over the tear, edges overlapping so wind meets a layered barrier rather than a single line of weakness. Halfway through, the small problem reveals itself. Your fingers begin to lose feeling. Even inside a tent, working near a damaged seam means sitting closer to drafts and cooler air. Numb fingers don't just feel uncomfortable, they make sloppy stitches, and sloppy stitches become future tears. You pause before the mistake happens. You pull your hands back to your chest and breathe into them, warming your gloves from the inside. You hold them near the lamp for a few seconds, not too close, not long enough to sweat. You take the warmed stone that's being passed around and press it briefly between your palms. Heat returns slowly, sensation blooming like a shy flower. Then you resume. The camp's patience with pauses feels like another kind of kindness. No one acts annoyed. No one measures your worth by constant output. They measure by whether you keep the work sound. When the stitching is complete, resin is warmed and pressed along the seam where patch meets skin. It flows into needle holes, sealing them, then cools into a dull armor. Ash is dusted lightly over the resin while it's still tacky, toughening the surface and making it less likely to crack. It's simple chemistry done with hands and memory. Sticky becomes solid, soft becomes strong. The repaired section is lifted and flexed gently. The seam holds. The patch bends with the skin instead of buckling. Someone runs their palm over it, feeling for gaps. Finding none, they set it aside to cool fully before it returns outside. You look at the finished repair and feel a quiet satisfaction that has nothing to do with praise. The camp will stay warmer tonight. The draft will stay out. The tent will hold when the next gust tests it. This is what resolution looks like in Hyperborea. Not a triumphant scene, not a dramatic speech, just a tear closed, a seam sealed, a problem prevented from becoming a story. When the patch is carried back into the wind, you follow to help hold the skin while it's lashed into place. Outside, the air is clearer now. The whiteout has retreated into the distance, leaving the world sharp again. Snowbanks sculpted into new shapes, rope lines half buried but intact. Above, the Aurora returns faintly, pale green rippling like a slow smile. The tent stands firm under its repaired skin, and the camp returns to its steady rhythm, as if the storm's attempted sabotage has been folded neatly away, another mark on the handle of the season, another lesson stitched into the fabric of staying alive. The repaired tent skin cools fully outside, resin dulling into a hardened seam that looks almost natural under the Aurora's faint green wash. The camp relaxes, not into laziness, but into steadier breath. The storm has passed, the tear has been mended, and now the world returns to its older conversation: wind, snow, sky, and the quiet ways people listen. Later, when your hands are no longer buzzing from stitching, you're guided out beyond the tents again, not for labor this time, but for orientation, because the storm has reminded everyone, politely and brutally, that the land can erase certainty in minutes. The air is clear enough to see distance now. The horizon returns, sharp and pale. Snowbanks sit like frozen waves. A low ridge cuts a line of darker shadow. The lake lies flat and black, its ice dusted with wind-blown powder. Above it all, the Aurora stretches like thin silk, pale green fading into milk white, then a blush you almost miss unless you relax your eyes. You were shown how to look up without romanticizing it. The sky is not a painting here. It is a tool. Cloud haze matters. Star sharpness matters. The way aurora brightens or dulls against the edges of clouds matters. People read these things the way you read moods on a coworker's face, subtle cues that tell you what kind of day you're about to have. You stand with your body angled against the wind because you have learned that posture is part of listening. You keep your scarf up, but not so high it muffles everything. You let your eyes soften and widen. Hard staring makes you miss slow change. A hand lifts toward the sky, not pointing, not claiming, just indicating a region where the aurora thickens. You watch as the peg's placement is compared to the sky, a certain ridge line, a certain band of aurora, a certain star cluster when visible. The board provides the memory, the sky provides the current condition. Together, they create orientation. You realize this is what you've been missing in your modern life, a relationship between record and reality. Your devices tell you where you are, but they don't teach you how to know. Here, knowledge is not outsourced, it is practiced. A small scenario unfolds, gentle but instructive. You are asked to stand a short distance from camp, still visible, still safe, and then turn your back. You do. The wind brushes your hood. The snow's brightness shifts. When you turn back, the tents are a little harder to distinguish than you expected. The camp has the audacity to look like a lump of whiteness, as if it enjoys being difficult. Your heart does that quick, silly jump again, the what-if reflex. What if you looked away too long? What if haze thickened? What if light flattened again? Instead of feeding the fear, you apply the lesson. You look for anchors, rope lines, stakes, the dark strip markers resin-sealed against fray. You look for the ridge shape that frames the camp. You look at the wind direction and remember how the tents are oriented away from it. You lift your gaze to the aurora and notice where its brightest band hangs relative to the ridge. You stop trying to force certainty and begin to build it from multiple small clues. You walk back calmly. Your boots find firmer crust where wind scours. You step into a shallow trough where earlier feet packed snow. You don't sprint, you don't dramatize, you simply move with attention. By the time you reach the nearest rope line, your nervous system has quieted, not because danger vanished, but because you're not helpless, inside it. Near the camp, you're shown the markers that keep roots alive in bad visibility. Short poles wrapped with dark leather strips, bits of bone tied at intervals, resin-stiffened cords that resist icing. You touch one and feel its hard, sealed surface. It's humble, but it's a lifeline. You think of the slack rope moment and feel gratitude sharpen into respect. The lesson ends the way Hyperborea likes endings, without fanfare. You stand a while longer, eyes half-lidded, watching Aurora curtains ripple like slow breathing above fur tents. The camp's smoke rises in a thin line, proof of controlled fire. The snow holds the memory of the storm, but it no longer feels like a threat. It feels like a teacher. And you, still an outsider, still a visitor, feel a new steadiness in your chest, as if the sky has lent you a small piece of its patience, and you've learned to read it without needing to own it. The lesson in the sky doesn't end with a ceremony. It ends the way weather ends when it chooses to be merciful, by thinning. The wind still moves, but it no longer shoves. The air still bites, but it doesn't feel like it's trying to sculpt you into a warning. You stand near the rope line with your scarf high and your eyes soft, watching the Aurora's pale curtains ripple above the fur tents. After the blank white corridor of the storm, the returning light feels like a gift handed back without comment. Morning arrives as diffuse brightness, a clean wash spread across snow. Drifts have been reshaped into new curves, and yesterday's paths have been smoothed over like a page wiped clear. In wind-scoured places, the crust shines faintly, almost metallic. In sheltered hollows, powder gathers in plush piles that look inviting until you remember how easily softness becomes a trap. You take a few measured steps and feel the ground's new moods under your boots, listening for the difference between firm and fickle. The camp steps out into this rewritten landscape with calm purpose. Rope lines are uncovered where they've been buried, markers are checked, dark leather strips still resin-sealed, bone pieces still tied at intervals, knots still flattened into reliable lumps your gloves can recognize even when your eyes are tired. You feel an odd affection for these unglamorous details. A few nights ago, you would have walked past them like they were background. Now you know they are the camp's spine. You join the work without being asked twice, because usefulness has become its own kind of comfort. You brush snow from the rope corridor with the flat board, sending powder sliding away in thin sheets. You clear around stakes so they remain visible, careful not to loosen them. You press a palm to the cord and listen for the hum, low, steady, the sound of tension held correctly. It's a small music, like the camp has found its even breathing again. Near the repaired tent, the patched seam sits dull and strong. Resin has cooled into a hard edge, and a dusting of ash has toughened it against cracking. You run your gloved fingers over the faint ridge where patch meets skin, and your mind returns to the moment your hands went numb mid-stitch. The warmed stone passed along like a shared heartbeat. The draft is gone. The repair has disappeared into the larger truth of this place. Solve the problem early, and then stop feeding it attention. The sled dogs stir with the contained restlessness of animals who sense the world has reopened. They shake snow from their fur in thick sprays, then settle again, then rise as if the air itself has announced something interesting. Harnesses are checked, straps straightened, knots laid flat. A short run follows the nearest safe route, nothing ambitious, just enough to test packed snow and confirm the storm didn't hide weakness under a smooth surface. You ride again, knees soft, weight centered, letting the runners skim while you keep your breath small and your movements quiet. Halfway out, a small problem clears its throat. The surface looks firm, but the sound under the runners changes. Less whisper, more brittle scrape. The lead dog slows by instinct. The handlers shift their weight. You feel the sled's confidence hesitate. It isn't panic, it's information. The team arcs around the shallow dip, choosing crust that sings steadier, and the glide returns. You store the lesson alongside rope knots and sky bands. Even after the storm breaks, the world still asks you to pay attention. Back in camp, the rhythm returns to maintenance, the steady rituals that keep the day from unraveling. Boots are set to dry without steaming. Mittens are opened and hung so air can reach them. The lamp is trimmed again because soot is a slow thief. Snow is melted in careful batches, venting steam quickly so damp doesn't cling to fur walls. Porridge returns, dependable as a heartbeat. You hold the bowl in both hands for a few breaths, warming your palms first, then eat slowly, letting heat settle under your ribs where it can do honest work. Outside, the lake lies still, its holes from last night crusted over with thin new ice. Someone scrapes them clean with a flat bone tool, and the ice breaks with a soft crackle like dry leaves. The sound pulls a small private smile from you because you remember your empty hook and the sudden resistance and how patience did more than force. You don't fish long today. It's enough to confirm the ice is sound and the water remains willing when asked properly. As the day leans toward evening, the Aurora strengthens again, pale and patient, and the camp's smoke rises in a thin, disciplined line. You stand at the edge of the ring of fur tents and let your gaze drift over the cleansed snow. The world looks newly invented, but not empty. It is full of systems, knots, seams, roots, shared heat, disciplined fire. You came here expecting the North to be only harsh. What it gives you instead is clarity, sharp air, honest silence, and the gentle proof that steadiness can turn a blank horizon into a place you can live. Evening settles in with the kind of quiet that feels deliberate, as if the world is dimming the lights for you. The camp tightens its circle, not from fear now, but from habit. Heat gathered, movement minimized, tasks finished before the cold can pretend it's in charge. Above the tents, the Aurora spreads wider, pale green drifting into milk white, then fading into a blush so faint it seems like a secret between sky and snow. You can feel the camp preparing something different, not loud, not festive in the modern sense, more like a gentle punctuation mark after the storm, a meal shaped slightly toward gratitude. The center fire is given a little more attention than usual. Embers are coaxed, not fed into flames, just encouraged into a warmer glow. A pot is set close enough to steam steadily, and the familiar scent of grain rises again. Porridge, yes, but altered. Dried berries are crushed more generously, their sharp sweetness waking the air. A careful curl of fat is added, melting into richness. Someone drops in a pinch of dried herbs, something resinous and bright that smells like walking through a pine grove in your sleep. Nearby, fish, small, clean, smoke-kissed, rests on a board. Strips of dried meat are warmed just enough to soften without losing their hold. A shallow pan sits near embers, taking in heat slowly, turning simple food into something that feels like a reward without becoming indulgence. The camp's rules of fairness remain. but the mood softens. Portions are still measured, still sensible, yet you notice the smallest kindnesses: an extra berry slipped into a bowl, a slightly thicker slice offered to someone whose shoulders still carry storm tension, a warmed stone tucked under an older person's feet before anyone thinks to ask. The generosity is quiet, but it is everywhere. You are included without being made into a spectacle. A bowl comes to you with two hands. You receive it the same way, warming your palms against the wood. The porridge tastes deeper tonight, grain and smoke and berry brightness, fat rounding the edges into comfort. It is not special the way city food tries to impress you. It is special the way a blanket is special when you're truly cold. Around you, hands lift food without hurry. Bodies angle closer, not crowding, simply sharing heat. The tense air thickens with breath and steam, and for once you don't flinch at moisture. It is managed, vented, balanced. The lamp glows steady, the embers pulse. Outside, wind brushes the tense skin like a hand smoothing a wrinkle. The celebration is made of small acts rather than noise. Someone brings out the carved, notched strip you saw before and lays it near the center, not as a performance, but as a quiet acknowledgement that the camp has endured another hard turn of weather. A tool handle with fresh scratches is placed beside it, new marks added with careful seriousness. The season's story is recorded without speeches. You understand now. This is how they say, "We're still here." You contribute in the only way that counts. You take on a final set of chores so others can rest deeper. You step outside with the board to brush snow from rope lines. The air is cold and clear, stars peeking through where cloud has thinned. The Aurora moves overhead like slow breath, and the snow reflects it faintly, turning the world into a pale, living glow. You check the stakes, pressing them deeper where wind has loosened crust. You run your glove along the rope and listen for the hum, feeling knots like raised landmarks. You pause at the repaired tent and confirm the patch holds firm, resin seam dull and strong. The draft stays out, the shelter stands. When you return inside, the tent welcomes you with warmth that feels earned, and someone slides a warmed stone near your feet without making it a moment. You sit, eat the last of your portion slowly, and let gratitude settle where anxiety usually lives. Later, when people begin to lie down, furs overlapping, spaces minimized, you remain awake for a little while, watching the lamp flame. It burns small and steady, a modest proof of control. You think of the storm, the slack rope, the numb fingers, the patch seam. You think of the dog's quiet readiness, the ice fishing stillness, the not-marked cords, the way the camp counts fairness like a sacred arithmetic. And you realize something that feels both simple and rare. You have been held. Not by softness, not by comfort the way modern life sells it to you, but by a community of careful systems, rules designed to keep bodies warm and minds calm. Outside, the Aurora continues its pale dance above fur tents. Inside, sleep begins to gather like snowfall, slow, quiet, inevitable. You let your eyelids grow heavier, and you feel, with a calm you didn't expect, that tomorrow will come, and you will meet it with steadier hands. You wake before anyone calls you into the day, because the camp does not start so much as it resumes. The lamp has burned low through the night, disciplined and steady, and the embers under ash still hold a faint pulse. You lie still for one more breath, listening to rope lines outside and the quieter tension inside your own chest, the place where modern life usually stores its noise. Here, that noise feels distant, like a storm that wandered off to bother someone else. You sit up and find the warmed stone near your feet, now cooled to a gentle weight. You roll it between your palms as if thanking something that never asked for gratitude. Your sleeve seam, your first small repair, still lies flat. The patched tent holds firm. Knots remain flattened, resin seams dull and strong. Everything you learned is still visible in the physical world, which is its own reassurance. Outside, the air is clear. The snow has tightened overnight into a crisp crust that squeaks under careful boots. Above, the aurora is pale but present, stretched thin across the sky, like silk pulled gently between invisible hands. Green fades into milk white. A blush of rose hovers at the edge, so faint you only catch it when you stop trying to name it. Morning work moves in a quiet arc, lamps trimmed, snow melted in small batches with quick venting, ropes checked, dog harnesses inspected. You join without being asked, because you now understand that participation is the only polite form of thanks. You brush powder from the rope corridor, uncovering dark leather strips resin-sealed against fray. You press a stake deeper where the storm loosened crust. You slide your gloved hand along the cord and let each familiar knot confirm where you are. When the work settles, a small bundle is placed near you, not a gift in the performative sense, not a souvenir with a price tag, but a token shaped for pockets. A bone charm, simple and smoothed, hangs from a short cord stiffened with resin so it will not unravel into fuzz the first time it meets winter. Its surface bears a few fine scratches, nothing dramatic, just enough to make it unmistakably itself. You hold it and feel the way it warms slowly, as if it remembers warmth and is willing to learn yours. You tuck it away carefully, not as proof you were here, but as a reminder of how you were here, slower, quieter, steadier. Departure happens the Hyperborean way, without a big moment. The dogs rise, shake snow from their coats, then stand ready, conserving energy. Lines are checked for twists. Harness straps are laid flat so they do not bite into fur. The sled is turned toward the route markers, toward the low ridge and the safe crust that sings the right note. You step onto the runners with soft knees, and the glide begins, smooth as a held breath. The camp shrinks behind you into a low ring of fur against white. Smoke rises in a thin line, controlled. The repaired seam disappears into the tent's curve, not because it never mattered, but because it mattered enough to be integrated, problems solved early, then released. As you move away, you notice what you missed when you arrived. The land is not empty, it is full of decisions. Drifts are shaped by wind direction, crust polished by exposure, hollows gathered where snow settles and hides hazards. There are memory anchors, stakes wrapped in dark strips, knots flattened into touchable certainty. There is the invisible map in the sky, Aurora bands sliding along their lines, cloud haze at the horizon, stars sharpening when air clears. The north is not silent, it is precise. A gust brushes your hood, and your mind flashes back to the whiteout, the slack rope, the blankness, the moment your instincts tried to sprint. You remember how you kept one hand on the line, how you counted steps, how you built certainty from knots and breath and measured movement. That memory does not feel like fear now. It feels like a tool you can carry back to warmer places, the kind nobody sells because it is not shiny. The aurora brightens overhead, pale green spilling across the snow like a gentle wash. The dogs keep their rhythm, steady shoulders, quiet breath, paws biting and releasing in a practiced pattern. Your body relaxes into the glide, and your mind gathers the camp's anchors one last time. Porridge steam in honey light, pine resin warmed until it turns glossy and seals a seam, numb fingers pausing to warm before mistakes, fairness measured without scales, shared heat passed stone to stone. You realize you are carrying steadiness, not souvenirs. You travel far enough that the camp becomes a single dark stitch on the horizon. You look back once more. The aurora continues its slow breathing above fur tents, indifferent and beautiful, and you understand that indifference can be mercy. The sky does not demand anything from you. It simply moves. It simply glows. It makes room for you to be small and still matter. You turn forward again, feeling the bone charm in your pocket and the steadier pace in your breath. Your footprints trail behind you for a moment, crisp in the new crust. Then wind softens their edges. Then snow dust settles, and they begin to disappear, not as an erasure, but as a gentle closing. What remains is not the mark you leave in the snow, but the steady skill of having been here, hand on the rope, eyes on the sky, heart slowed to match the north's patient rhythm. The glide has ended, but your body still remembers it. The soft bend of knees, the way your breath stays smaller when the air turns sharp. You let that memory settle, not as a thrill, but as a quiet instruction you can use later in warmer rooms when your mind tries to sprint again for no reason. In your imagination, the aurora continues above the distant tents, pale green breathing in slow folds, as if the sky is pulling a blanket across the world. The rope lines remain taut, the knots remain flat, the resin stays sealed. The dogs curl into their fur, conserving warmth like a secret. The embers rest under ash, patient and alive, waiting for morning without demanding it. You feel your shoulders drop a little further. You feel your jaw unclench. You notice how your hands rest, palms open, no longer gripping the day like it might escape. If worries arrive, you do not wrestle them. You do what the camp taught you. You place one steady hand on something real, your own breath, your own heartbeat, the wake of your blanket, and you count slowly until the edges soften. Picture your footprints in the new crust, crisp for a moment, then gently blurred by wind, not erased, just released. That is how tonight can be. You have done enough. You are allowed to stop being sharp. Let the aurora fade to milk white, then to a whisper of rose, then to simple darkness that feels safe. Let the tents become a small dot on the horizon, then a memory, then a calm warmth behind your ribs. You breathe in, slow, and breathe out, slower, and the north grows quieter, quieter, until even the cold becomes a soft, distant hush. Your eyes grow heavy, and sleep comes like snowfall. End of story. Sweet dreams.